Good morning, y'all. What's going on? This is your man, Sabir Aleem, and welcome to Daddy's Right Here Live. Great day, right? I forgot my coffee, and you know I can't sit here without having my coffee first thing in the morning. But it's been an interesting week, needless to say, and I'll have some follow-up remarks to the Wise View show that I had earlier this week on Wednesday in regard to some social events that have taken place over the past week. But today, we're not here to talk about politics. We're here to talk about, I guess we are in many ways, relationships. 7 keys to a healthy relationship. And you know, and one of the things that I'm often faced with internally is, wow, all these things that I've learned over the last couple of years, why didn't I know these things back when I was a teenager, when I was in early adulthood, when I was in middle adulthood? You know, and sometimes I would beat myself up about those kind of things, man, because you think because you're a certain age, right, that you should be at a certain place in your life, that you should have a certain level of knowledge, but that's not entirely true. And a lot of times what happens is we get into this judgmental thing about ourselves, and then we also do the same to other people. And we don't know people's paths. We really don't. And that's where a lot of the confusion comes in to play when we're in relationships, because we make a lot of assumptions, right? But you have to look at it from this perspective. And I said this in previous shows, and I'm going to continue to reiterate this point. Every event that happens, whether they're similar or dissimilar events, will impact each individual differently. Each of you will watch this show today and come away from it with a totally different perspective. Each of us can read the same news article and come away with a different interpretation based on what? Our own internal filters. Our own internal filters, right? We've had things that have taken place along the way in our lives that have become deeply embedded within our spirit, within the confines of our mind. And we need to understand that first, right? We really need to come to understand that first, because there are 2 different sets of experiences happening here, right? One that is interrupting your spirit. And there's a reason why it's interrupting your spirit. Because something within the confines of your mind, right, oozes out. It creeps out into different circumstances. It rears its ugly head at times in situations where probably you don't want it to. And it brings forth one of your less endearing traits. And you see that wounded look in the eyes of a person who stands before you, who you truly and dearly love. Once again, you see that look. And it's not intentional. So a lot of times when we look at relationships failing, relationships that have failed, even those that have been together for a long time, most of the instances, people have not gone inside themselves. And that's the difficulty in being and living with someone else. Because the focus is always on them. Because as self-centered as we are, right? As selfish as we are, the internal struggling of not being as such is always happening. And if you're not clear on that, go to my video on the id, the ego, and the superego, and it breaks it all down about the human being. See, we don't see where self-righteousness is our greatest shortcoming. Because what happens is we make a lot of assumptions about things, but we don't realize what we're driven by is the core of self. And the core of self is that id, that part of self that wants what it wants, when it wants it, and it wants it right now. Your ego and your superego are what balances the id. Go look for yourself. You don't have to believe me. Go look for yourself. Look it up for yourself. Look up Sigmund Freud, right? Stages of human development. And you will come to understand some of that. See, there are things that we should be doing at particular points in our lives, right, as we develop. And what happens is there are a lot of missteps that don't happen in early childhood, in middle childhood and late childhood, as we enter into that preteen stage, there's a lot of things that do not happen, that have not been happening, right? Because what we do is we parent based on how we think our parents should have parented us. And that's how we begin to parent our children. And as we parent our children in that capacity, we're grooming our children to be like us. Yeah. We're grooming them to be like us. So when a child finds a thing about the parent that they dislike and speak about it, the parent was automatically offended because the parent, right, has groomed the child to be this way. They've groomed the child to be this way. So now you're looking at a mini me and you're faced with yourself. Our children are the best mirrors. I don't know what happened here, but let's get back on course here. Hold on one second, folks. Somewhere along the line I got disconnected. I got disconnected from Facebook. Hopefully I'm back on. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened with the connection with Facebook, but welcome back. So what happens is we're grooming, right, our children to be just like us. And then we find behaviors about them that they present every day, and we dislike those behaviors. And we begin to chastise the child for the very behaviors that exist within us. They're our own behaviors. Right? So when we start looking at relationships, the first relationship, that we experience as children is with our parents. That's where that first relationship is established. It's established with our parents. So we begin to see from that parental relationship how to have relationships. And we think it's healthy. We think that that's the way things are supposed to be. We think. And this, I'm talking about as a child. Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the teen years or preteen years, right? Those critical stages of development. But here, we're learning how to talk to one another. If you yell and scream at me, right? How am I internalizing that? What I become acclimated to doing is yelling and screaming back at you. And when I yell and scream back at you, now you chastise me. You chastise me for doing what it is that you do to me. When I become combative toward you, you don't see where you become combative in situations right before me. So I see these things. I see where you're combative. I see where you're argumentative with others. So I become the same way. I do the same thing. So when you come to me as a child and you say something to me, I'm argumentative, I'm combative, I'm doing all those very same things. The same exact things. Right? So now I come into those years where I'm going into school. I'm going to school, I'm having relationships with other people. The dynamics between me and those other people, right, is very critical. It's very critical. Because I'm taken into this environment, what you have groomed me to be. So now, when I start yelling back at my teacher, because I haven't been established within about the difference between an adult relationship and a child relationship. So I continue to have a relationship based on just my internal conditioning. There's no establishment of what respect is towards me as an adult, what an adult is, and so on and so forth. I don't know those things. I don't know the difference between adult and child. All I know is I'm talking to another person. This person is bigger than me. This person is smaller than me. This person is the same size as me. I don't know the difference. So now here I'm in an environment where I'm talking to others, just the way you talk to me at home. Just like you said to me at home, I'm talking to others in that same capacity. Right? So now, you getting called up to the school because I'm talking to adults, I'm talking to teachers in a manner that's not acceptable. And you come in, you're angry, right, that I'm talking that way, but you're actually angry at yourself. But you can't say that you're angry at yourself. You say that you're angry at the child because the child shouldn't be acting this way. But you taught me that. Now you want to attempt to unteach me and establish what right and wrong is and what an adult is. I don't even know what the word adult means. I don't even know what a grown person, I don't know what that means as a child. Because you've never established that boundary for me. You've never established what that is. We say a lot of words to children and think the children understand the definitions of the words, but they don't understand the definitions of the words. They're using the words in the same context that you have used before them. And that's how they begin to use it. They haven't learned definition. They haven't learned the difference of those things yet. Right? So now here I'm coming into the years of my life, right? I'm entering into the years of my life where I'm talking to other people in the same way that I've been conditioned to. I don't know how to problem solve. I don't know how to have any kind of dialogue that brings resolve to things. I've learned to be yelling and screaming and arguing. I don't know what resolve is. I don't know what problem solving is because you're not having that conversation with me. You're not having that conversation with me. The only conversation you continue to have with me is call yourself teaching me how to live, you know, and be in a child position, but you're still talking to me as an adult. So I still have an adult-like way of dealing with things because you're not educating me at a level of that a child can understand things. And this is important, folks, right? So as I enter into those preteen years, those preteen years are the years where I'm coming into myself, smelling yourself, as you know, many of us adults call it. You're beginning to smell yourself, right? You're beginning to develop a relationship with others, intimate, very intimate relationships, not necessarily sexual, but intimate relationships. So you're forming a connection with people, right? That's where you start with the girlfriend-boyfriend thing, and you start with the, well, now it's electronic, so now you start taking selfies and sending selfies, and they have sexting now, that they send pictures of themselves, like not totally nude, but little glimpses of areas of self because they're developing that relationship. Then don't forget, you still haven't had that conversation because you're trying to conceal from your children sex. You're trying to conceal that. You don't want to have that dialogue with them because they're too young to know, but they're learning right next to the student, right next to little Johnny is teaching, little Mary, they're getting all that anyway, and they're watching you. They haven't seen you because you don't always close the door. They hear the moans, they see the books, they see the movies, but anywho, so now here I am in this stage of development, right, where I have been groomed to be combative, to be difficult, right, to not learn how to problem solve, to yell and scream and argue in situations, right? So my emotional management is unmanaged because you haven't taught me that. Because you get angry at me when I do what you told me to do or that you showed me to do, and that's how I react to the world around me. So as I come into early adulthood, right, I still have the same conditioning. But there's expectations when you're in early adulthood from others around you because you should be responsible in your actions. You should be responsible in your thinking according to what society has deemed as being responsible. And what we see in today's society is a lot of unmanaged anger, a lot of poor problem solving behavior, right, and an overall bad attitude. An overall bad attitude. That's what we see in today's society. So we see a lot of the rubbernecking, you know, we see a lot of the posturing. We see all of that because that's what we're shown coming up in many ways, right? And again, what we have to understand is this. This is not about bad parenting. This is about relationship development and understanding how relationships are developed for us as children. As children. And how we can't make the distinction between responsible and irresponsible, right? And how important it is to have good, healthy, intimate relationships with a child. I'm not sure what continues to happen with this video here on Facebook, y'all. Y'all really have to forgive me. It keeps cutting off, and I'm not sure why. Give me a minute, I'll be right back on. Give me 2 seconds here, and this is the benefit of live. Hey y'all, on Facebook, welcome back. I'm not really sure what's happening with the connection. It keeps going in and out. but hopefully you'll tune back in and catch back up. If not, please forgive me. You can go to Twitter and catch up with the show as well. And if you're having any kind of other technical difficulties, please make sure you catch the show on my Sibiralene educational station. Again, my apologies for whatever is going on this morning. Okay, so anywho, I'm saying all these things to say that along the way, there's a lot of misinformation given. It's a lot of misinformation shown, because children do what we do, not what we say. So it's a lot of misinformation that takes place through the course of the years for children. And as they come into, adult situations, begin to enter into, relationships, it's difficult to make the distinction between right and wrong when you've been conditioned in one capacity, and then you have to be faced with the expectations of a partner who thinks that you should do things in a particular manner. And this is where our problem comes in. So here's an article on Psychology Today. The title of this article is 7 Keys to a Healthy and Happy Relationship. It's 7 ways your relationship can reach its potential. This article is by Stephanie A. Sarkis, Ph.D. And I'm going to start with the first thing on the list. So number 1 on this list is mutual respect. We're going to start there, to the article. If you don't have this, well, it's going to be a tough road. This doesn't mean you agree with everything your partner says or does. It does mean that you have admiration for each other and steady undercurrent of love and trust throughout your relationship. You also have each other's back. John Gottman, a pioneer in studying couples and marriage, could tell within minutes whether a couple was in it for the long haul or if they weren't going to make it, with startling accuracy. How could he tell? If there were any signs of contempt in the couple's interaction with each other, the relationship usually didn't make it. Abuse, whether it's physical, verbal, or emotional, defies mutual respect in every way, shape, and form. We have to have mutual respect to have a healthy relationship. This is real important to understand. And it goes back to what I've been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes in terms of conditioning. Right? This is where you have to begin to understand in the conversation, in the disagreement, what your core looks like in terms of problem solving. Because many of us have very poor problem solving skills. Right? We have skills, they're just poor in many ways, because when you're faced with certain things, what do you typically do? The human being has this fight or flight mechanism within. Therefore, when faced with certain situations where I can't handle, right? Do I fight? And what does fighting look like? Right? Is it showed in my body language? Is it the arching of the eyebrows, the tightening up, the gritting of one's teeth? Right, the attitude that comes in, that defense attitude that comes in, ready to just go all in, ready to be offensive but being defensive but being offensive to the other person, right? Do I walk away? Do I become disregarding? Right? Do I say hurtful things to deflect? Right? Do I create a diversion and say, well, you too, you do it too, or do I flight? That's it, I'm done. I can't do this. Right? Right? How do you deal with those kind of things? Right? So when you look at mutual respect and something happens, how do you deal with that? Right? Do you sit down and listen to the other person? Is that something that we should be doing? Is that how we resolve things between us? Because that's part of mutual respect. Right? Sure, sometimes we get heated, about things, voices get raised. Right? So it's not me disrespecting you, it's me not knowing how to deal with a certain thing. So it's important that we begin to understand, oh, well, wait a minute, this seems to be like a little emotional right now. Maybe we should just take a break from this and come back to it later. No, we're going to talk about it now. Well, it's not going to work out because it's just going to get ugly. So when we look at mutual respect, it has to go back to the admiration that you had from the beginning. What did you see about this person that you admired? What drew you to this person? And if it was anything other than the person, which is always the case, but when it's materialistically, that's difficult. And that's why, like, you can automatically see, and that's what's referring here in regards to Mr. Gottman, being able to see automatically how long the relationship would typically last with this couple, because he saw the contempt, right? And when you see contempt, not content, but contempt, right, between two people, guaranteed it's not going to last long, because it's just a matter of time before this thing blows up and turns into something else, because you don't have that admiration for your partner. You don't. If you admire me, as your partner, why would you have contempt for me? Why? Why would you not show me respect in any circumstance? And again, domestic violence excluded. But why would you not show me mutual respect? Why would you not hear me out? Why would you have a problem, right, with me expressing my feelings to you about a circumstance? Whether you agree or not, it's not even important. But your admiration for me warrants such. It should warrant such. In many cases it doesn't. And in many cases it doesn't, because the conditioning of the individual who is experiencing that discomfort, right, is locked and loaded onto, you're not going to talk to me this way. You're not, you get locked into that, and that goes back into my last week's video about the vows that we take within. We take vows within, right, that supersede even our marriage vows, because we don't want to deal with certain things, because you're just not going to take it anymore. You're not going to have it anymore. Not looking at the circumstance, because each circumstance is different. Okay, so when you look at here where it talks about, it does mean that you have admiration for each other, and steady undercurrent of love and trust throughout your relationship. That has to be an ongoing. That's why it says a steady undercurrent. So that should always be flowing through you. Just like when you go to some lakes and rivers, the water on top looks still, but the undercurrent is moving. It's moving, even if the water looks still on top, right? So it should always be that undercurrent of love flowing. So if you don't have that undercurrent that's constantly flowing within you, there's a problem. That means it goes back to what were your intentions for entering into this relationship, which goes back to the id needing to be satisfied. You entered into this. Listen, every relationship that we enter into is something that we want. Let's get that clear. So let's stop acting like that we're not in this relationship just because we saw something that we wanted and we went after it. We have to be able to identify what it is that we wanted about that relationship. And what happens is, because we enter into a relationship for our own want, first and foremost, we lose sight of, right, our needs. And that's a whole nother video that I do on wants and needs. But first and foremost, we're entering into it because of what we want, whatever that reason, right? So if the undercurrent of love is not there, and you're focused on what you want, that's up here, how you see things should be, right? How you want things to be, those expectations, right? Those expectations sometimes become the undercurrent. And there is no undercurrent of love. There's an undercurrent of expectations, of my own desires, of my own wants, right? And my own needs. And the needs typically show up in a relationship unconsciously, because you're focused on the want, what I want to be satisfied, what I have to have, what I'm telling myself that I have to have for me to be satisfied and remain in this relationship. So again, that undercurrent of love and trust. Trust is another thing that's really important in terms of that undercurrent, because we know that if you don't have trust, full trust in a relationship, right? If you have doubts, that you can trust this person, and not just trusting that person in terms of being fidel, but in the sense that, like, listen, I got your back. I got you. And whatever decision I make, believe that. You should believe that I'm going to make a decision that's in the best interest of us. Of us. Period. You have to believe that. So, number 2 on the list is talking about arguing and not fighting. Right? The article. I've never seen a healthy couple that doesn't argue. And we need to get that out the way. And I'm going to say that again, because I've said this in many of my shows. I've never seen a healthy couple that doesn't argue. They never fight. However, they argue. If a couple comes into my office and tells me they've never argued, something isn't quite right. You can argue without fighting. Arguing is non-combative. You and your partner state your point of view without name calling or voice raising. Sometimes you agree to disagree, and that's okay. Figure out what your non-negotiables are, the things that you will not budge on. Now rethink that list. I like the saying, you can either be right or married. Hopefully you and your partner's values match up pretty well. That makes things much easier. And that last sentence is real important to understand too, because it goes back to the beginning of the show where I talked about how people are conditioned, right? Which establishes your values, which is where your super ego and your ego come into play. What do you value? Do you value this a relationship between you and another person? Do you value this relationship? What is it about this relationship that you value? When you ask your partner the question of why do you love me, we come up with all these sweet, wonderful, and poetic responses. But at the end of the day, if I ask you what do you value about me and this relationship, what kind of response would you get? Think about it. What kind of response would you get? Because here we're talking about looking at what's important to your foundation of living. Because that's how we conduct ourselves. We should conduct ourselves in life. We're pursuing, adherence to that which we ascribe to, which is our value system. What do we value about living? What do we value about a relationship? Because entering into a relationship should not just be grounded in the sex. But if that's your value, then that's what your relationship is going to be driven by. Right? That's what your relationship is going to be driven by. And we're not talking about encounters. We're talking here, the conversation is about a relationship. Right? A relationship. What is the relationship value? Right? So even if we have a relationship where we establish that, listen, it's going to be like that. We're just going to hook up and we're good with that, and that's fine. But so what is the value there? Does that mean that I don't care about you as a person? Does that mean that I don't help you in any capacity? Because, the value of the relationship as far on my end is just based on, we just doing this and that's it. I'm not doing, so that's the value. And you need to know that. You need to know what that value is. How a person interacts with you at the sexual level is also important, because that shows the value once again. But again, the article is focusing specifically on keys to a healthy and happy relationship, and want to focus on couples development, because this is what the article is really keying in on, how couples, can make their relationships happier, Um, it also says here that arguing is non-combative. You and your partner state your points of view without name-calling or raising your voice. And this goes back to that mutuality, right? The mutual respect. That goes back to the very first one we were talking about here. Because, right, we have to establish that. But if I feel like I can't talk to you, if I feel like there is no mutuality here, this is what you begin to see. You begin to see the elevated voice levels. You begin to see the combativeness starting to show up. You begin to see that contempt. You begin to see that contempt. And over time, that contempt begins to snowball. It begins to roll downhill, right? Rapidly, rolling downhill. It goes downhill real fast, right? And then you begin to see a different side of the person. And listen, I'm going to tell you, because that's one of my areas of concern, because when I enter into relationships, a lot of times I have found, right, and I found these in my marriages, the mutuality is not there. It's not there. And that's where it becomes one-sided. And that's where my issues of codependency kick in. Right? And I've learned that about myself over the years, because what happens is I begin to yield to the other person, and the other person's conditioning begins to be the dominant driving force in a relationship. Right? All because of my own unresolved issues of codependency, which I've greatly worked on, trust me. But it's something that I've learned. Right? That because I don't want to hurt you, because my value is I want to spare your feelings, because I don't want to see you hurt, right? Because I don't want to see you leave me, or because all those things about me protecting you and not protecting myself. Not protecting myself. That's not mutual, right? That's not mutual, because it's okay to be that. It's okay to do that. But if the other person is not taking that same consideration, that same approach to things, then there's no mutuality. Because that other person should be wanting to, avoid hurting you and find a different approach for addressing things, and not being combative and not moving into that condition of contempt. Contempt. So that has been much of my experience, right? Which is where, listen, if you start talking to me in a manner that I find like, yo, why would you talk to me that way? I'm the one who has your back. I've demonstrated that I have your back. Why would you continue to think that it's okay to address me in that capacity? Why would you think it's okay for you to talk to me like that? Why would you think that's okay? And then become argumentative and combative when something is said to you about it. Because when you don't say things about things, when you try to protect somebody and you don't be truthful about it, right? When you do become truthful about it, the contempt comes from, I've always done this. You've never had a problem before. Or because they didn't observe that hurt look that I talked about, that less endearing trait that you put upon me, and that wounded look in my eyes that you caused, right? Because they're not aware of that, because of the mutuality again, because of their lack of awareness and being in tune with you, and only being in tune with their own selfish wants and needs. They never saw it. But now their contempt comes out of the fact that you have not said anything about it before. That's the only way it's going to be looked at. I'll just tell you the way it is. That's the only way it's going to be looked at. You ain't say nothing about it before. I thought it was okay. Even though they know it's wrong, even though they see right now that it's wrong, even though they're hearing it and say, yeah, damn, well, that would be wrong. Well, why would I? It's not going to be the outcome. The outcome is going to be, you didn't say anything about it before. Why are you saying something about it now? Now the accusatory tone comes in. Oh, you want somebody else? You seeing somebody else? And even if it's not said, right, it's implied in their statements to you. And if it's implied in their statements to you, then it resides right here within the confines of their mind. And it may have absolutely nothing to do with you. And I say may have, because there's a lot of circumstances that happen in relationships and dynamics which kind of allude to certain things and then it's just built on because the person doesn't want to address their own issues. So it's a lot more to all of that. Figure out what your non-negotiables are, the things that you will not budge on. And again, this goes back to, we're not going to do that now. No, we're disagreeing right now. We have an argument right now. Now you want to take a position. This is where a lot of people go wrong, because now you want to take the position what you're not going to budge on. But if you had this kind of conversation while we were dating, right, about how things are problem solved, about what are your non-negotiables, have we had this discussion beforehand, what would be the likelihood of us entering into this conversation? And in most cases, what you're non-negotiable on is not made clear until you're being non-negotiable in a situation. And now the relationship is in harm's way. Not now, it's already been, but now it's in harm's way. Now it's a matter of, okay, so what am I supposed to do now? I love this person, but now they're telling me that this is non-negotiable. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years in, now this is a circumstance that we've never faced before. Now you're telling me this is non-negotiable. How did this become non-negotiable? What happened to that undercurrent of love? What happened to that mutuality, that respect? What happened to that? Where did all that go? See, relationships are not what they call static. Just because you're together in the same place for years doesn't make the relationship itself static. Relationship is ongoing. Relationships are their daily activities to continue to grow and build. You just don't say we're in a relationship and that's it. And that's how a lot of people treat relationships. Like you put your ring on a finger, okay, that's it, I'm in. No. No, you have to continue to grow. You got to continue to work on you. Not work on the other person. You got to continue to work on yourself. And that's where people get lost. Because it's like, yo, we together. Why are you? Well, you knew this. Oh, wait a minute. The idea here was that we enter into a relationship and that we grow together. Because, listen, could you live with you? Think about it for a minute. Could you really live with you in a relationship? Knowing yourself, would you really want somebody just like you? Would you really want a clone to be your partner? And if you say yes to that, then I'm going to take you back to Adam and Eve. Because there was a reason why God in his infinite wisdom gave Adam Eve. You can try to go away from that if you want, but that's a reality, folks. There's a reality there. Without any religious connotations, any kind of connection, just look at the fact that God gave man woman. And there's a need there for both. Right? So, what it's saying here is, now rethink that list. So when you get to that point of you won't budge on this, go back to the list and ask yourself, what is it really about this particular thing that I've determined that I don't want to budge on? What is it? Why is it I think I can't budge on this? Because it's what you think. There's no fact to support it. There's no fact to support it, right? So you go back to we're arguing and fighting, but it's not really a situation where I have a dog in that fight. And when I say I, I'm talking about either person, because a lot of times, most times, the fight is not mine. It's your own fight. It's something that you need to deal with on your own. It's something that you need to address within yourself. It is. But I become part of that fight because I'm in a relationship with you. And that's the other thing about relationships. When we're in a relationship together, when we're married, that's what we get. That's part of the relationship. That's part of the marriage. You get my stuff. You get my stuff. I get your stuff. But when you go back to the mutuality, when you go back to the mutual respect, when you go to the undercurrent of love, when you go back to the admiration that we should have for one another. Right? When you go back to those things, where is that? Is that there? Is that there? Because we keep throwing around this term, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And you can hear that from anybody, anywhere. Especially when I'm in the middle of getting what I want. Come on. A child, you take a child to a candy store and get them a lollipop. What are they saying to you? I love you, mommy. I love you, daddy. Why? Because they're getting what they want. That's just the nature. That's the nature of the human being, man. Come on. It needs to be satisfied. If you're satisfying me, I'm good. I got all kind of wildlife stuff going on out here right now, y'all. So just forgive me if I keep looking that way. I ain't sketching or nothing. But it's like a flock of birds and there's ducks walking around over here and there's other stuff going on. So, but that's what we do. That's natural. It's not unnatural. We keep trying to get away from our natural conditioning. Right? Number 3 on the list. Agreement on sex. Oh, here we go. Okay. You're both okay with how often you have sex, how you have sex, where you have sex, and there's mutual participation. Sex is not withheld as a punishment. And if you or your partner are not comfortable with an aspect of your sex life, you can talk about it openly without criticism. And I think this is where another critical area happens in relationships. Yeah, what was the movie? It was a movie, I'm trying to think, was it Kevin Hart in it? And he was talking to, like he was trying to get his wife to perform oral sex on him, and she just wasn't having it, and he was telling her, well, I don't understand what the problem is. Everybody else, my boys, they getting it. Their wives ain't got no problem with it. Why do you get it? And he went on and on and on and on and on. But the reality of it is that happens. It happens. We want things from our partners. You know, turn over, put your legs up, stand up. You know, we're in the parking lot, it's dark. You know, let's get a quickie. You know, I mean, you know, all kinds of things that, you know, hey, listen, that's, but sometimes we're afraid to be that person. Sometimes we try to show that side of us to our partners. Our partners be like, that's appalling. In your office? In the parking lot? Always when the moment hits, like, I'm like, come on, let's, you know, I'm with it. You know, but everybody's not. Everybody's not. And instead of judging your partner, right, just have the conversation which you're not being comfortable with. And it's okay that you're not comfortable with it. That's okay. But if you don't have the conversation and you only react from here, from the confines of your mind, right, or you see it as a values conflict, right, that's being judgmental. Right? That's being self-righteous because that's not your values. It's okay. Nobody challenged that. That's what I want. That's who I am. I'm like, let's get it in. Right? I'm all right wherever it is. I'm just not that kind of person. But if you say, well, babe, I'm not comfortable with that. Okay. Why? Because that undercurrent of love is there. That undercurrent of love is there. That undercurrent of trust is there. I ain't gonna get mad. Put my clothes back on you. No, that's a whole different behavior. But if I'm, you know, we at the moment and I'm trying to, you know, no, babe, no, I'm not comfortable. Okay. I can't wait to get you home. Let's hurry up and get in this car. You know, you change your course there. Why? Because the undercurrent of love and trust, that's there. Right? But if you go off, what's wrong with you? I don't know what kind of woman you think I am. I don't know what kind of man you think I am. That we're going to, who you been around? What you been doing? And now we just been together for a minute. I'm feeling more comfortable with you, and that's just, I'm just letting another part of me out. Don't mean I'm like, but again, but it's a conversation to be had. It says here, right, that you're both okay with how often you have sex, right? Because it's another conversation to be had. Right? You know, if you an everyday kind of getting it in kind of person, and the other person's like, well, nah, that's a bit much for me. Right? You know, every other day, you know, you got to have that discussion, though. You've got to have that discussion. You've got to. Because everybody ain't every day. They're just not. They're just not. And it's a variety of reasons why. But it doesn't matter why, because often you ask, well, why can't we do it every day? No, well, I'm just not comfortable with that. You know, well, I just think that's, Negro, sometimes I need a break. You be up in there like you trying to like find something. You know, so I need a break sometimes. Right? Listen, it feels good, it's great. But for some people, like, yo, you be wearing me out. I need a rest. And we have to respect that. Again, that's that undercurrent of love and trust. You have to trust it. Listen, I'm not telling you no. I'm just saying, like, can we agree? Because you should never deny, right, your partner, right, sex as a punishment. Right? But if you begin to like make it look like I'm wrong about my desire, instead of us having a conversation, right, about, you know, your sexual habit, your sexual appetite, right, and you just kind of like treat it like, yo, dude, you just being greedy, that means I'm going to start feeling some way. And again, that contempt creeps back in. That contempt creeps back in. So it's something you need to be talking about. If you or your partner are not comfortable with an aspect of your sex life, you can talk about it openly without criticism. You have to understand the difference, right, between criticizing and just expressing what you feel in terms of like your own sexuality. So when I tell people, I said, in moments of conflict, quote this, teach me, make every moment a teach you about me moment instead of a tell you about you moment. You get that one? Let me give it back to you again. Teach me, make it a teach me about, a teach you about me. Make every moment a teach you about me moment instead of a tell you about you moment. When we get in our feelings, first thing we want to do is tell somebody about themselves. In a moment such as this, where you got some feelings about this sexual relationship, tell me something about you. Teach me about you. Well, and that means that you're starting with an I statement. You're starting with an I statement. And the I statement is how, you know, you have an insatiable appetite for sex. And sometimes, right, you just feel the need for release, and in your mind, you feel as though that's that person's responsibility to fulfill. And somebody's responsibility isn't always to fulfill just because, you know, that's what we feel we need, or we tell ourselves that's what we need, when it's really what we want. Because there's other things that we can do with that too, right? There's other things that we can do, you know. Yes, mom's not we can do. You know, that don't always have to lead into performing sex in that capacity, right? So we have to kind of compromise. You know, you might have to do some hand work. You know, you might have to do some mouth work. You might have to do some other things, right? You know, you might have to work it out yourself. Rub that thing out. You know, whatever it is, but you should have the discussion about it. And you should have the discussion about that, right? When you start talking about masturbation, you want to have a conversation about that, right? Because that's important. It's important to understand, like, you know, that some enjoy pornography, some don't. Some have serious issues with people who watch pornography, who are their partners. They got feelings about that. That should be part of a conversation as well. That should be part of a conversation as well. And it's often not. Sometimes people are embarrassed by it. Sometimes people become reliant upon it because they've been trying to abstain from being with others, and that becomes a habit for them. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's not. Listen, remember that undercurrent of love. It's not for you to judge. It's not for you to criticize. It's not for you to become self-righteous. Because when you look at your own sexual habits or lack thereof, you would kind of see, oh, well, now I understand. Everybody has their own, right? Okay, so we're going to go to, one more thing on that I didn't read. Back to the article. You also find time to have sex. I don't care how busy or tired the two of you are, there is always time for sex. It's not say that every time, babe, what about tomorrow? I really need, I just need a break. You know, just, can we do tomorrow? So we're finding the time. We're finding the time, right? It's not like every day, okay, wait, so when we going? Yeah, it's, you know, Scott, like, hold, listen, how about tomorrow morning? Can we get a little break here? It's been a long day. I'm not telling you no, if that's what you feel that you have to do. But again, that mutuality, right? That undercurrent of love and trust. Tomorrow's all right, baby. All right. Okay. But you always have to find time. Number 4 on that list. This is my area here, which is probably where we're going to stop today on number 4, because there's 7 of them here. I'm certainly not going to get through the list, nor am I going to rush through the list. So number 4 on this list, and again, I'm reading from the article, Psychology Today, 7 Keys to a Healthy and Happy Relationship. And the article is by Stephanie A. Sarkis, Ph.D. Okay, so we're on number 4, and number 4 is agreement on parenting. And for those of you who don't know, I'm founder and president of Daddy's Right Here Incorporated, a nonprofit family services organization that seeks to decrease father absenteeism. And we do that in a number of ways. We provide educational workshops, lectures, trainings, classes, and these online videos, all in an effort to bridge the gap between fathers and their children or the mothers of their children. Because we know that when the individual does better, the family does better, and that makes for better communities. So, this here, number 4, is on point for me. Agreement on parenting. To the article. There are basically 3 main styles of parenting. A, authoritarian. The rules are the rules are the rules, no exceptions. That's number 1 on the list. And we have, right, got my coffee, but see, remember before the show started, I went to get it. Excuse me. You have some parents who are like that, very rigid. And remember in the beginning of the show, go back to the beginning of the show, and that's why I talked in the beginning about conditioning as children and how that conditioning as children trickles into adult life, right? Very rigid. No, you can't. No, you can't wear that. No, you can't go there. No, no, no. No, he can't. No, she can't. No, I don't want that to happen. No, my child is not going there. It's just black or white thinking. Very rigid, and that's how that person's style of parenting is. Now, you're going to be able to see as we go along down this list of how this becomes a problem in a relationship. B, authoritative. Now, we just had authoritarian. Now we have authoritative. This is what I refer to as a benevolent dictatorship. There are rules, and kids can give their input, but the parents should have the final say. Excuse me. So, you have to ask yourself, right, did you come from that environment? Were you, in the environment that you were in, were you able to express yourself? Were you able to give your view on what happened? Give your side on what happened? And give, you know, some... Now, it reminds me that the commercial... What's that auto insurance commercial? The kid comes in there and he starts trying to intellectualize what just happened with the car and how the insurance, you know, took care of all of that. And mom says, 4 weeks. And he said, okay, thank you. And he walks out. That's what that kind of reminds me of. So... it was a matter of, okay, yeah, you have a view. We sat and we listened to you, intently. We gave you your moment. 4 weeks. It's like, okay, thank you. And he understood that. So, did you grow up in that environment? Or did you grow up in a very rigid environment? Again, because these two together will certainly clash, right? Because this one is saying that there are rules and kids can give their input. The other one is not. You stay in a child's place. You ain't got nothing to say. Well, I know you didn't you weren't even thinking about going in there and talking, giving you a little spill about how the insurance company took care of this little minor fender bender and all this. No. C, lenient or laissez-faire, there are minimal rules. Now, we know we've seen people who allow their kids to just fall out, to do this, to do that, to say what they want out of their mouths, to slam doors, right, to throw things, right, to stomp off, to make, remarks after they've been told to do something, or that they weren't going to be able to do something, right? And some of us have a problem with that. And I think, it's like you have to individualize the circumstance. And again, it goes back to, right, the authoritarian perspective of you can say what you feel you need to say. But it also goes back to the very beginning of the show where I talked about how you conditioned your child to react to circumstances. You conditioned your child to react that way because that's how you reacted to what they did. And because they learned from what we do, that was the conditioning. But also you have to understand is that you're teaching your children that they do have a voice, but you're giving them some guidance and some direction in the circumstance and helping them to understand what's proper and what's improper. Okay? So, if the two of you don't agree on a parenting style, back to the article, you need to talk. Also, if you differ on whether your children should be spanked or not, you need to talk. You may have each grown up, here we are here, with different parenting styles, and we each tend to parent the same way we were parented. And I talked about this in the beginning of the show. If you don't have kids yet, but are thinking about it, you must have this conversation with your partner. People can change their personality styles. A lot of that depends on, and it talks about number 6, but we're not going to be at number 6 today because we are at the hour today. But it goes back to the beginning of the show and where we are right now, right? That if you don't start looking at you, because this is about you, and this is all of our conflicts, you'll find, all of our conflicts with our partner begins and ends with us. Begins and ends with us. We see things at the beginning of the relationship, we see red flags, we think that we can change a person. We think a person has potential. We think we can love it away. We think over time it'll go away.